Hi.
Hey, Michael.
And I'm setting up the Facebook Live right now. So we're being recorded and we're hopefully going to Facebook Live. Everyone say a prayer that it works.
If people can just make sure they're muted so we don't get like, extra noise. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we are live on Facebook as well. Woohoo. Okay. And let me see if anyone else is waiting. Let's see the chat. Okay. So we are just going to wait for people to come in for another minute or two, and then we'll get started. How's everybody? Good? Okay, oh, I realized you muted yourself, sorry.
It's good. I had my first workshops today with my beginning workshop, and we did full on Felicia's anti-racist model as is, as much as we could because of the virtual, and it went really well. So I'm tired from the Zoom, but I'm also like energized. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I did my first in-person workshop yesterday since March of last year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was funny because I was talking to the administrator for it and we were both complaining about being around other people and not wanting to touch other people or see other people. And then we're like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this workshop in person after all. But they were really lovely about it because they rented just a huge conference room for only 12 people. So they put 2 people on a 6-foot table, separated the tables, brought me a mic, but I talk loud enough that I didn't need it, but they did bring me a mic so that I could talk to the entire room. And so everybody had masks on when they weren't, eating or drinking something, and everybody stayed far away. I even managed book signings with people being respectful of distance. So I was like, okay, this can be done. I don't want to do it again for a while, but it can be done. We're coming back.
Okay.
I think here in University of Cincinnati, we're going to be fully in person in the fall is the plan, as well as still teach online for Colorado State University. And I teach online there, but I think they're also planning to be in person. So the fall is going to be, we're going to see, I think, at least at the university level.
Okay, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get started if that's okay with everyone. So welcome, thank you so much for being here. And those of you following us on Facebook Live, thank you so much for watching. This is the first panel in a series that I'm envisioning, Corridas, Cumbias, y Chicana Poetics, Embodiment of Cultural Trauma and Resilience. So my intention for tonight and for this series that will be an inclusive space for Latinx and Latina poets to share our experiences in our lives, in academia, in the publishing world. And I was actually listening to Selena. I was listening to one of her, it was Tu Solo Tu, and I was just jamming out. And I was thinking about, I should write a book, that had, I think something had just happened. Someone was saying, oh, it was the American dirt, all of that, And so there was this going around like, I'm going to write my Latinx novel, including, everything about Selena. And so it was kind of a joke, right? To show like how Latinx you are. And I was like, I really do include Selena. Like that's actually an influence in my life. And so I was like, I want to get a bunch of other Chicana poets together and talk about, our influences, talk about Selena, talk about Cumbias, and, and I really wish that we could all be in person and actually get up and dance together. But I just wanted to create this space where it was about our voices, because that's not something that I've been invited onto panels, as an afterthought in the past, just to make it more diverse or something like that, and I wanted it to be like, no, this space was created by us, for us, to talk about our experiences as Chicana poets. And so I wanted to make sure that this is a series so that it's inclusive of all of the different experiences, Afro Latinx poets, mixed, just it's everybody that identifies as Latinx and Latina would be included in these conversations. But this first panel, I really wanted to focus on Chicana poets. And so I invited these wonderful, badass, beautiful poets that I'm inspired by, whose work, keeps me afloat. And so tonight we have Leslie Contreras Schwartz, Xochi Julissa Bermejo, Irene Lara Silva, Michelle Otero, Felicia Zamora, and myself, Jen Givon. Oh, I'm sorry, and of course, Sarah Borjas. And so I want to just take a minute to read just a little bit of the bios here, and then we're going to get into the conversation, and it'll be a round robin in which all of us describe our experiences as Chicana poets. So growing up on the border in Mexicali, before really there was like the internet was a big thing, I had no idea that there were other poets, let alone Chicana poets. And I felt like I was alone. I really felt like I was completely alone in the desert. And so I wanted to make sure that we had this space. Originally, we were going to go to AWP, and then that was canceled for COVID last year. And so then we were going to do it online with AWP, but they wanted us to pay, and they wanted to make it, that paywall, so that you could only access it if you had paid. And I said to myself, well, growing up, in the desert, in relative poverty, I don't know that I ever would have had access to this. And so I don't want to create that barrier. This is about making connection, making space. And so I'm recording this. We're going to post it to YouTube. So you poet out there, you Chicana poet, this is your tribe. These are your people. This is your familia, your gente. So this is for you. And that's why we're here this evening. So thank you so much for being here. Okay, Leslie Contreras Schwartz is the Houston Poet Laureate, and her fourth book, Black Dove Paloma Negra, has come out with Flower Song Press in 2020. She was named a finalist for the Helen C. Smith Memorial Award for 2020 Best Book of Poetry from the Texas Institute of Letters. So Leslie, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We would love to hear about your experience as a Chicana poet.
Thank you, Jen. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm excited also to just include all of the different identities of women that call themselves Latina. We have so many different experiences, and I love that we're talking about this and our own experiences. So I'll go into how I grew up and how I became a writer. So I grew up in a neighborhood that was mostly Latinx, Asian, Black, immigrant. It's in the greater Houston area, but really it's its own town. I didn't really leave that place until I went off to college. But really off to college meant I went down into the downtown Houston. But I was pretty isolated within that community. I wasn't really exposed to any writers of growing up. And so the books that I tended to read were what I was drawn to as an adolescent and a teen who was struggling with a chaotic household, a family that was struggling financially and feeling powerless. So I remember going to the library or to the bookstore, looking at the poetry section, pulling books out and saying, I really want something to feel compelling to me. I really want to connect with something, but not finding it, and not understanding the right questions to ask so that I could find it. So I ended up reading a lot of sci-fi, apocalyptic sci-fi, and pulp romance, V.C. Andrews. You know, like there's this girl or woman who is a victim, and then she rises above, and it's always got like some. It's not very feminist, but those are what I read, and I kept wanting more. So really, what changed my life was my brother, my older brother. He started Nuestra Palabra in Houston with Tony Diaz, and they saw that there was nothing in Houston. We had all these writers, these Latinx writers, and no platform. Nobody was organizing. So they started at Chapultepec restaurant, and my brother invited me. I was, very shy. My voice was shaking, but I read my very first poem in that restaurant. And so my brother he was in college. I was in high school. He just kept bringing me books. Everything he read, he brought it to me. So really, he was my mentor, and it still is. And I think what brought me to writing, I was exposed to things that, I saw Sandra Cisneros read at Nuestra Palabra events. I saw Ana Castillo read. But when I got to college was really when I read more women of color and felt a lot more influenced, like Toni Morrison, Louise Erdrich. I think I am influenced by many women of color writers. My journey as I got older in writing, I told this to someone, I can't believe it. 5 years ago, I was a mother of three children, 3 young children. I had a couple of literary publications, small journals. I had no books. I had no connections. I didn't go to readings because I was a mom. I was breastfeeding. I was, and I was writing. I was writing so much. I was writing, on receipts and napkins and reading so much. I went to graduate school, but I was still, I couldn't get published and get my work out there, and feeling isolated because I couldn't go out to readings or meet people. So something clicked, and I just told myself, I'm going to try. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to write a book about motherhood, about how mixed up it is and how chaotic and problematic and jarring it can be. And I'm going to try to get it published. So I sent it out. It got rejected 30 times. And finally, I got a small press. And that's what really got me. I got my confidence. It built my confidence, and I kept trying and I kept going. So I'm still like that this day. There's always a new hurdle that I want to jump over. And personally, I've always tried to focus on this impulse to create. Like I've always had that impulse. And no matter what happens, if I get a bigger publisher, or if I write a novel, like the daily life of writing is what has kept me going as an artist, needing to share experience. And I would say I would be remiss to not mention this. My greatest influences are my grandmothers, my 4 aunts, my sister, and my mother. They are the people who have shaped me the most and who guide my writing, my connections with them, and my relationships with them. All strong, fierce, successful in their own ways. So that's my experience.
Thank you so much, Leslie. That was beautiful. Let's go ahead and move on for now, and we'll circle back around. So our next speaker is Xochitl Julissa Bermejo, who is the daughter of Mexican immigrants and the author of Posada, Offerings of Witness and Refuge, from Sundress Publications 2016, a former Steinbeck Fellow, Poets and Writers California Exchange winner, and Barbara Deming Memorial Fund grantee. And she's been published all kinds of places. All of the poets here tonight are just, you know, really killing it in the publishing world. And so I'm so excited to hear from you, Xochitl Julissa.
Thank you, Jen, for having me. I'm so excited to be here with just like such a badass group of Chicanas and to be talking about being a Chicana, because I love being Chicana. I remember in high school, one of my earliest memories was I found some books in the school library, and I just remember like being at lunch and sitting on the floor of the library and reading about Chicano history and like the walkouts and, you know, the grape strikes and all that stuff. And I used to get teased. I went to this little Catholic private school, like preppy private school. And even though like a lot of my friends were at least like half Latinx, they would see me and like tease me. And like I had a friend who would call me like brown power girl. And then like in my classes, I loved English class. I always loved English class. I remember my senior year, I wrote this like super meaningful, like social justice poem. And my teacher was just like kind of pat on the head, like, okay, that's cute. And then he gave me a B where my friend wrote a sonnet about Three's Company, and he thought it was hilarious. So he gave my friend an A. And I was like, what the? So yeah, I was always caring about social justice and just like being passionate. And then I got to go to college and I went to San Francisco State. And so that was like my first time being in a space with like a diverse group of people and people talking about important issues. And I was, you know, like going to classes about Latinx, like Latinx studies classes. And I was just like, oh, finally I'm with people who like get me. And that was really amazing. And then like, I always liked writing, but I never took it seriously. And there was always like poems about boys and like being sad and crying and like, you know, that kind of stuff. And then when I was in college, my mom was in college at the same time. So when I was growing up, she always told me and my brothers, that, oh, you have to go to college, you have to go to college. She was telling us that forever. I was the youngest. And I have 3 older brothers. So from my oldest brother to me, the whole time she told us all we were going to college. My oldest brother went to Stanford. He was the first of our family to even go to college, you know, of all our generations. And by the time it got to me, she was like, well, if I keep telling them to go to college, I better go to college. So she and I went around the same time, and she went to Cal State LA, and she was in the Latino studies classes at Cal State LA. And so she had all the like books, right? But I was in theater. So I was doing theater stuff, but I would come home and look through her library. And one time I saw a book and it said How to Be a Chicana Role Model by Michelle Serros. And I like saw that and I went, yeah, I want to do that. That sounds like me. Let me see what it says. And I thought it literally was going to be like a how-to book of like, this is how you become a Chicana role model. And I was like, great, tell me how. And then, you know, it wasn't, it's her memoir. But that to me was like mind blowing. That was one of the first times that I saw that it was like where she demystified this idea of what it means to be a writer. Like I thought to be a writer, you had to be fancy and you had to be really smart and you had to have all these things and this education I didn't have and, you know, this viewpoint I didn't have, you know, I didn't ever feel, like I said, like early on, my teachers were like, you know, didn't see much in me, you know? So yeah, that was the first time where I was like, oh, I can just write a book and I can like make the book and I can have it with me and it could be my coffee table. I always remember there's a scene where her box of books was her coffee table. And I was like, it can be that simple. Like I can do that. So that was, Michelle Serros is definitely one of the biggest influences on me as a poet and a Chicana poet. And just to say like, I can do this. I don't have to be something I'm not, basically. I can just be me and I can do this. So that's, yeah. And then I was teaching high school and I wasn't happy teaching high school. And I was like, okay, well, now's the time. If I'm ever gonna be a writer, I better do it now. And so and that's when I started like I took a class at a community college and then I went into an MFA. And, but then even in the MFA, which is crazy, thankfully, I don't think this would happen today because there's been a lot of work at my school to not do these kinds of things. But I remember being in my MFA program, and of course, you know, still to this day, if you ever ask anyone for like a Chicana writer, most people will most regular people will tell you Sandra Cisneros, if they can name one, right? So I remember my MFA, I was like, oh, I want to write about my family and I like writing about my culture, but I don't know, there's already a Sandra Cisneros. Like, how mixed up was my mind? I was like, there's already a Sandra, so maybe I should do something else. And my mentor agreed with me. My mentor was like, yeah, you should really do something else. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, if there was only like one way to be a Chicana, you know, poet in the world, like, anyway, so that also sticks with me. But thankfully I didn't listen to that mentor, and I don't know how the other mujeres here, but like, I didn't really read, like, you know, I didn't read Gloria Anzaldúa until I was probably 30. Right? I didn't read Cherríe Moraga till that time either. Like, I didn't even get those books when I was in grad school. Like, nobody handed those books to me, right? I had to be after grad school. And then like going to Vona and going to Las Dos Brujas and working with Juan Felipe Herrera. It's like, we still have to, I hope it's changing and getting better, but I feel like so much of my education, even though I'm still paying for my MFA, it came after that. And being in spaces like this with like-minded folks and being told like, oh, have you read this book? You gotta read this book. But yeah, so that's my journey to here, and I'm happy to be in this space with you all.
Oh, I love it so much. And Michelle Cerros is amazing. She's so funny. And my introduction to her work was Chicana Falsa, her poetry collection. And I loved it so much because, you know, I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker. I'm very pocha. I speak Spanglish, you know, and I loved that. It was like, she's naming that Chicana Falsa, and it's like, you can just be yourself. You don't have to try and fit into any, you know, stereotype of what it is in order to be successful as a Chicana poet. And so I love, Leslie, you were talking about your experiences with motherhood and that you came to it really on your own, and Xochitl, very similar, but not through the motherhood route, but that you were teaching yourself. So I love that there's the connections there that are already being made. Okay. Let's keep going. We have so many wonderful women tonight to share their experiences with us. The next speaker is Irene Lara Silva, who is the author of 3 poetry collections. Irene, correct me on the pronunciation. It's Furia?
Furia.
Sí, okay. From Mouthfeel Press, and then Blood Sugar Canto from Saddle Road Press. And can you tell us the name of your 3rd book?
Cuicacali, House of Song.
Thank you so much. And as well as a short story collection, Flesh to Bone, which won the Premio Aztlán. She and poet Dan Vera are also the co-editors of, can you pronounce? Iman, Poets Writing in the Anzaldúan Borderlands, a collection of poetry and essays. Irene is the recipient of a 2017 NALAC Fund for the Arts Grant, and final recipient of the Alfredo Cisneros del Moral Award, and many others. And she's working on her first novel. Irene, take it away.
So where do I start? So let me see. So I started off, my parents were migrant truck drivers, meaning they migrated through Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. They processed, or rather they would lift the harvest from the fields, take it to the processing plants. So we were constantly moving. I was usually in 4 or 5 schools every school year. And my parents had only made it to 1st, 2nd grade of school. So they were both illiterate in both English and Spanish, and were predominantly Spanish speakers. In fact, I think when I started school, I only spoke Spanish. But by the time I was 12, almost all the Spanish was gone, other than what I spoke to my parents with. And everything was English, except that I think then I fell in love with música ranchera. And then that's what brought all the Spanish back, was singing all the time, which I still tend to do. And I will sing pretty much anywhere, restaurant, street, somebody's car, until somebody throws me out. But it was that love of music, really, I think, that inspired poetry in me. And I started writing as a kid, but it wasn't until I got to college, I think, that I really found my voice, that I really found what I wanted to do with language. I grew up in different kind of Texas schools, a lot of rural schools. So I didn't even know that Latinx writers, much less Chicanx writers, existed in published books. It wasn't until I left South Texas, 2,000 miles, went to upstate New York, that then there was two lucky things. One was that I found in one particular library, the two shelves that were nothing but books written by Chicanas. I didn't know who anybody was. I picked up one book and I just read them in order, and I just went down both shelves. I found out recently that my short story collection is now in that section of that library. So that makes me very happy that it's traveled 2,000 miles away. But school was where I went to it was a Latino Hispanic freshman writing comp class. And I remember that 6 weeks in, my professor pulled me aside and said, "What are you doing majoring in engineering? You're not supposed to be in engineering." And she handed me her copy of This Bridge Called Our Back, edited by Anzaldúa and Cherríe Moraga. So I was introduced to that straight away. So I think it maybe took 4 more days for me to decide not to become an engineer and to go over to the humanities. And I tell people all the time, this is what landed me in a life of poverty and struggle. But that book and all of the voices of those women of color, what that book did for me was it blew my mind open. And it completely rearranged my idea of what language could do, of what stories could do, of what poetry could do. And it reverberated throughout the couple more years that I went to college. Unlike some people, I didn't learn how to read my poems in cafes or in classrooms. I started reading poems at protests. And so it was a very different feeling, a very different vibe, a very different sort of oral tradition when you're reading live to a lot of people that are passionate, or that are angry, or that are vehement, or that are decided in their course of action. From there, what happened after that? So I ended up leaving college. I tell a lot of people, I didn't plan to become the like water for chocolate daughter, but I ended up being the one who took care of my mother and took care of my father for a while. And I'm about almost 20 years into taking care of my younger brother. So it's been a lot of caregiver years. And it interestingly put me in a place where I then ended up working a lot of bread and butter jobs, sometimes multiple jobs, a lot of, manual labor, a lot of cheap labor, a lot of administrative, completely, nothing labor. But while I was doing that, I told myself, if I have to do this, if I have to earn enough to put a roof over my head and put food on the table and pay for medical expenses and whatever else, I'm going to write every other minute that I have. And so that's what I did. So for about 10 years, I think from 2001 till 2010, I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. I had a manuscript of short stories and I had a manuscript of poetry. And I submitted them everywhere and they got rejected everywhere. I have a notebook that, details all the places they were rejected. Every single Latino press in existence rejected me at least once, sometimes twice, and a few of them 3 times. And these years were passing and nothing was happening. And it wasn't until I submitted to a chapbook contest with Mouthfeel. And this is where I think it's so important when we think of when we think of independent presses, and with the work that they do, the valuable work they do of publishing voices that would otherwise slip through. It was monumental to me, the effect. I mean, I tell Maria Miranda Maloney, the publisher, all the time. She thinks I'm joking. I'm like, it literally saved my life. I was so depressed waiting for this first book to get published. And in fact, it was supposed to be a chapbook, but then she said it's too long. We'd have to cut it in half. And I was like, no. She said, well, forget it. We'll publish it as a book instead of a chapbook. And so that's what we did. And everything changed from there. My short story collection got rejected by everybody. Again, multiple times by some people. And it wasn't until one day it occurred to me to submit it to Aunt Loot, where Gloria Anzaldúa had been published, that then everything came together. And in the time since, it's almost impossible to try to condense the experience of the last 11 years, since publication, how that changes what you do, how that changes the way you move in the world, how that changes your intent for what writing is. I think at the beginning, I thought that writing was a way to express myself and to share my story. What I came to learn after the first book and sharing it with people is that I think writing is, for many of us, I think the gift that we struggle all our lives to be able to master making. We want to become masters at making these gifts that we can share with other people, of inspiring conversations that might not otherwise happen. My second book of poetry, The Blood Sugar Canto, is about diabetes. I mean, how many conversations, how much shame, how many secrets have I heard from people? And before this book, they had no way to try to begin this discussion, to try to share these truths about themselves. Now, at the point that I'm at now, I'm very concerned. What I've moved into knowing is that what I want to write about, and what I want to write about for the rest of the years that I have, is that I want to write about healing the wounds of history, healing our ideas about relationship, figuring out how to free ourselves. You know, we think of decolonization. You know, what does decolonization of our minds look like? How can we, as people who have grown up in these systems, even recognize what is freedom? And those are the questions that I am obsessed about, and that I want to continue exploring, that I want to figure out how to make something that we can talk about, and how to perhaps explore possible solutions or ways that we can transform ourselves around these things. And that's what fuels me now. You know, now I am 3.5 years away from retiring. Now I'm very, very tired all the time. But what fuels me is this desire to know this, to learn more about this, and to share as much of this as I possibly can before my days are done.
Irene, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. I've loved everything that you said, and I'm holding it in my heart. That's why we're here, right? And that's what this is all about, is about reaching out and creating a space for our voices to be heard, so that others can be empowered to share their stories as well and know that they're not alone. And I know that's what our books and that's what our words are doing for each other. Thank you so much, Irene. So our next speaker is Michelle Otero, who served as the Poet Laureate of Albuquerque from 2018 to 2020. She is the author of the essay collection Malinche's Daughter, the poetry collection Bosque, and the forthcoming Vessels, a Memoir of Borders. Originally from Deming, New Mexico, she holds a BA in history from Harvard College and an MFA in creative writing from Vermont College. She's a member of Macondo Writers Workshop. Welcome, Michelle.
Hey, thank you. What a gift and what good medicine to be here with all of you. And I can attest to Irene's singing. I have a really vivid and fond memory of taking grito lessons from her at Our Lady of the Lake several summers ago. So when I think about my own writing journey, I think so much of my writing has been about finding my way out of shame and separation into belonging. And that's taken many different forms. And so I'll probably talk about shame a little bit this evening, because I think I've been thinking a lot about this, this idea of what is that space between being avergonzada and being sinvergüenza, right? And what is that space that we hold, and how do we show up and work with that in our writing and in our poetry? So I grew up in a small town about 30 miles north of the US-Mexico border in Deming, New Mexico. There was one high school, one stoplight. I have 4 brothers, no sisters, lots of boy cousins, very few female cousins, lots of tios, very few tias. And so my upbringing was very male. And for me to kind of figure out how to be a girl in that setting was a little confusing. And so some of my writing and my poetry journey has been about also creating community with women, and using that term all inclusively. At first, it was women who looked like me, Chicana women, like Latinx women, cis women, straight women, and because of the own work that I had to do, and thanks to like really wonderful friendships and being able to read many different people, I've been able to like expand that circle and learn a lot about just my own blind spots, about, you know, who we leave out, about whose voices we should support, whose work, who we call into the circle with us. And so I'm also going to talk a little bit about friendship. So early on in my life, kind of at key points, I was mentored by men who stepped in. So one, I met my aunt at a graduation party, and she told him about me and was like, I have this ambitious niece and she wants to go to a fancy college. Can you help her? And he was like, yeah, here's how to do it. So he really worked with me on all my application essays, helped me to get into Harvard, and sent me off at age 18 as the first person in my town to get accepted to that school. And I remember walking through that gate, and my uncle at the time was married to a flight attendant. He lived in DC. He got a free flight, because this is how we do it, right? He got a free flight from DC to Boston, rented a car, picked me up. I had another friend from high school who had gotten to Boston the week before I did, and he was going to UMass Boston. So, so Hernando, my uncle David, and me walk through this gate, and there's all these like Bentleys and Jags and limos, and dads in khakis and polo shirts, and moms in pedal pushers and page boy haircuts. And I'm like, what is this place? And I remember feeling like my suitcase just weighed 2,000 pounds, because before I left, my mom was like, you're going there isn't just important for you, it's important for all of us. And my dad told me, if you get there and it's not what you want to be, you can always come home. So I'm holding all of this, and I hear from behind me, Hernando whisper to my uncle David, God, I'm glad I don't have to go here. So it took me all 4 of those years to figure out how to be me in that place, to figure out how to ask for help, to figure out that what I learned in one particular class could relate to what I was learning in another class, to recognize that that my lack of preparation wasn't about my intellect or about my capabilities or what I had inside me or what I had to offer, but it was all about preparation, that I didn't have the resources, that when you are the daughter of people who first language was punished out of them in school, it doesn't leave a lot of room. When you're working class, it doesn't leave a lot of room to be well-read, to go to the symphony or the opera, to know how to navigate these systems. So I was fortunate there to meet a couple of professors. Actually, I'm realizing that I had a lot of Jewish men just help me on my journey. So one of them in my class said, the stuff you're writing about, you should really check out this book, Borderlands by Gloria Anzaldúa. So they had a copy in the library. I devoured that. And then I just looked up, I was like, what's related to, this is all before Google, right? Before everything was on computer. So I'm going through the card catalog, and it's like, what's related to Gloria Anzaldúa? And then it was Always Running by Luis Rodriguez. And then it was The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. And I think those were the 3 books by Chicano and Chicana writers that I was able to get my hands on at the time. So fast forward at the end of this time, and really just having my mind blown open by people, having access to folks who were different from me, having access to, being able to, being able to see Yo-Yo Ma perform like on campus, and having access to these different books and to this amazing class I took my senior year called US History and Fiction and Fact. And that was really the first time I was able to read Beloved, the autobiography of Malcolm X. And for my final paper, I turned in a short story. And that's where I was really validated as a writer. I remember there was a fellow student in the class who said, permit me to say you have a future as a writer. And I was all, what? Like, do people do that? Does he know who I am or where I come from? Or and so I just kind of sat on that for a long time. So I want to fast forward to one last. Actually, I'm going to fast forward to like the circles of women that I've been able to kind of have access to, and who have really kind of pushed me not only to be a better writer, but to be a better human and to show up in better ways especially at this time when we're so divided and separated from each other. So one is a group in El Paso, and it's Carolina Monsivais, Jeanette Monsivais, and Emmy Perez. We formed this loose collective called the Women Writers Collective, and raised money for Amigos de las Mujeres de Juarez. And we're still in touch with each other and kind of connected to one another. And then another group is a group that formed out of Macondo, and it's with Anel Flores, Maria Limon, and Erasmo Guerra. And we call ourselves the desnudos, like the naked ones, because it's with each other that we're able to really kind of bare our souls and show up for one another. And I think of what Sandra said that very first year that I was at Macondo, and it was, I'm not going to send you out of this. I'm not going to send your work out of here being anything less than excellent. And I think like that's what these circles have given to me. However flawed, however we might trip over each other, however we might trip over as we walk toward liberation. It's that commitment to being excellent, not only on the page, but showing up as full and whole human beings. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was beautiful. So much I could relate to. And I want to reiterate for anyone who joined us later in the conversation that tonight I had originally envisioned this as a space for Chicana Poets, but that I am envisioning a series, and I would love your help. Anyone who would like to participate, anyone who would like to recommend someone that I get in touch with. This is about inclusive Latina identity. And so, yeah, send me your recommendations, and you can email me. I'll write it in the chat. And I'm at Jen Givon on Facebook, and Jenna B, it's JENNABEE_84 at yahoo.com. So get in touch with me, and I would love to continue this series for inclusive Latina identity and Latinx identity. Okay, our next speaker is Felicia Zamora, who is the author of 6 books of poetry, including I Always Carry My Bones, winner of the 2020 Iowa Poetry Prize from University of Iowa Press. She's also the author of Body of Render, which was the winner of the 2018 Benjamin Saltman Award, and of Forms and Gather, which was the winner of the 2016 Andres Montoya Poetry Prize. Welcome, Felicia.
Thank you so much, Jen. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing space with us tonight, talking about Chicanx Poetics, talking about our journeys, and also just thinking about the spaces in which Latinx artists are taking up larger space, hopefully, and continue to take up larger space in the publishing industry, but also just in creative writing in general, I think is a conversation that I hope we will continue to talk about today and moving forward. You know, identity for me is really a lifelong contemplation. I think for many people it is, but for me specifically, I realized in preparing for this panel, there's sort of a lot I have to divulge about myself that has taken me 40 some years to put into my art. And you know, I just want to say to artists out there, you know, it's your own time frame, right? Like you're the one who is both being and becoming always simultaneously. And I feel that I'm always changing. I'm always building community. I think that others defined me at such a young age that calling myself Chicana later in life was such an important designation for myself. When I was growing up, my brother and sister and I were the first kids of color in the really small town in Iowa that we grew up in. And that was horrible. It was violent, physically, emotionally. both inside the family and outside the family, because we were estranged from our Mexican culture. My father was from Mexico, and we have not met him. My mom put us in a car when I was 1 year old, and went from Mexico to Iowa, and left everything she owned. And so we've never met our father. And growing up in an all-white household where my mom moved in with my grandparents living in Iowa, and we were 3 brown kids in a white house in a white town, and immediately were told that we were other, that we were Mexican. I was nothing other than Mexican growing up, and that was made blatantly clear to me. And so that was something that I came to terms with at a very young age, that I'm Mexican, this is what I am. And I began to really, really embrace that, and also how social justice and liberation and radicalization really becomes a part of who you are when you're constantly othered in so many ways. And actually there are times in my writing and my artistry that I reclaim this idea of being other. I reclaim the idea of being a thing, because these are ideations that I can grab for myself and say, yes, this is who I am. And so many, some individuals have mentioned living in poverty or low socioeconomic class. I don't think my mom made over $13,000 ever raising 3 children on her own. We frequented the food bank. And, I think, Michelle, you brought up shame. The shame of being hungry, the shame of having to start working in the fields when I was 8, the shame of having to help pay bills, or not being able to afford over, a 10-cent t-shirt at the local thrift store, like all these things where, and now they're parts of me that I love, like I wouldn't give those up. But at the time it felt like I wasn't able to fully understand it. And my brother and sister and I were fortunate. My sister, the oldest, she was actually put in special education for being brown. And so that sort of tells you the area that we were in. And my grandfather I loved my grandfather. It was a very complex relationship, but he said horrible things to me and my siblings, and did horrible things to me and my siblings. And yet we loved him. And so there's so much complexity of who we are and our identities. And then going off to college and being privileged enough to get scholarships, because I was not the smartest kid in school, but I was working my ass off, realizing that I was going to be another pattern. And my brother and sister and I all went to college. We were all first generation. I'm not even actually sure how that happened. And then going into, the Latinx Cultural Center, the Hispanic Cultural Center at the time, but Latinx Cultural Center, and then being told I wasn't brown enough, and that I didn't speak Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish still, and being told that the entire identity that I'd only had growing up and who I was, that's not who I was. And so again, this moments of other people trying to label me and trying to tell me who my identity is. And Sushi, I think you brought up the learning that comes after the MFA. I love my MFA. I would never give that up. Although I was not a writer, it took me even through the MFA to admit I was a poet. It was in my mind, I'm I have to be something useful, which is a ridiculous thing. I mean, I remember I think it was Washington Post, maybe, Roxane Gay had an article and an essay that said, as being a Black woman, always felt like she had to be 5 times better or greater than just an average white man. or an average white person. And I feel like as women of color, being Chicana, we're always trying to be 5 times, 10 times better than, which is completely exhausting. And then we hit a point where I'm tired and we're still trying to be 10 times better than. And I feel like that really does call at us as well. And I love the MFA, but I learned how to write white, and I had to undo so much shit from my MFA. I'm still processing it. You know, I didn't read Sandra Cisneros. I didn't read Anzaldúa until after the MFA, because I didn't know what I didn't know yet. I hadn't hit that part of my journey. And so for those of you who might be listening and are thinking, you know, why does my voice matter? Fuck, it matters. It really does matter. You know, your Chicana voice matters, your Latinx voice matters, your trans queer voice matters, your Black voice matters, like your Indigenous voice matters. Like all of this does, because we have to systemically change the narrative about access. That's really where it begins. And I'm still learning this. I'm in my 40s and I'm learning this shit now, and I feel great about it. I feel excited and on fire about it, but I also realized that, Leslie, you know, this impulse to create, this isolatedness that you felt, I felt that too. I felt like I didn't belong in so many things. And so I felt siloed, and I'm tired of being siloed. I want community. I want to be in communities, even if I'm saying the wrong things. I want to learn, and I want to figure out how to be part of a community that works toward liberation. I think it was said, what does freedom look like? You know, I was in this women of color workshop, and the presenter asked us, this is about 10 years ago, what would it look like to be liberated from our oppression of whiteness? And we couldn't, like, my table of 7 highly educated women of color could not fathom what being liberated of our oppression would look like. And that's where we need to be moving toward, right? Of being able to fathom it, being able to understand it. And I think that that's where, you know, Chicana literature, Latinx literature, the voices are going. We're going to take this narrative and we're going to fucking rip it apart. And we're going to say this dominant narrative doesn't apply to us anymore. And it's no longer going to be a dominant narrative. It's just going to be a narrative. And it's not going to define us anymore. Yeah, so I guess that's very tangent. I'm kind of tired today, but that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I'm all about the private into public, and realizing that, you know, our bodies, our brown bodies, our upbringings, they help in working toward this radicalization of breaking down the systems and structures, because that's really where it is. You know, Michelle, you know, that access, that lack of preparation, that wasn't you. It was a system that fucking failed us, has failed each one of us in some way, shape, or form. And we got to work toward that. And poetry, creative writing, art, this is the mechanism to help do so. It's activism.
Yeah. Woo, amen. I feel like I just went to poetry church. I'm like, I'm ready to go write. I'm ready to go take on the world. Thank you so much, Felicia. That was beautiful. Our next speaker is Sarah Borjas, who is a Chicanx pocha from the Americas before it was stolen and its people were colonized, and is a Fresno poet. Yeah, George Floyd, Delana Ashley, Jan Gonzalez, Lorenzo Perez, Xiaoji Tan, say their names, Joyce, Eshaquan. Her debut collection of poetry, Heart Like a Window, Mouth Like a Cliff, was published by Naomi Press in 2019 and won a 2020 American Book Award. And yeah, Sarah, thank you so much for being here. Take it away.
Thank you, Jen. Hey, everybody. Thanks for showing up and being here. I know a lot of us been on Zoom all day, so we know and we thank you. for holding it down with us. Joining from Fresno, from Yokut territory, and from my old room. I'm at my parents' house, so it feels like a pretty, formally righteous way to start, because when I was growing up, a lot of what you said, Felicia, resonates with me. And as far as like the story of becoming what is now, I'm going to call a poet, but at the time it was like, I just grew up like with this promise of whiteness that I was always like chasing, but I didn't know it was whiteness, right? And I also didn't know I was Chicana until I was like 25, I don't think it came out of my mouth because I was so ashamed, I would be like, no, I'm not Mexican at school, and be like, I don't speak Spanish, I was just like really wanted to push everything away. And so growing up, my parents were fucking scared, and they didn't want me to go through the same bullshit they went through. So they tried to make me as assimilated as possible, and it worked. And it worked. So, I grew up, with the, the vision of like, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have some kids, I'm going to have a 401k, I'm going to have health insurance, I'm going to have 2 cars, cable, like presents at Christmas, like fucking pot roast, like just crazy shit in my head, right? Just shit that I would have never thought. And I never even had pot roast till I was like 23. But in my head, since I was little, I was envisioning like fucking pot roast, You know what? There's this, so when I was little, I don't know why my grandma gave this to me. Well, I guess I know why. But I guess I wrote this poem when I was like super little, and she put it in a frame, and it's just in this closet. So I just whipped it out. But it says some crazy shit like, I was like 5 and I was using the words like woodland creatures, honey, squirrel. Like these are things that were not in my experience. But that like dream of whiteness and my education into whiteness, like I feel was really distorted my reality. And at the same time, I felt like I wanted to be as powerful as the boys, and I knew that I was competing often with like my brother, and so my dad really bred me to be an athlete. And he was like, if you don't get a scholarship, you're not going to college because we can't afford it, but you need to because you need to get assimilated and do all these things. And so, I worked my ass off like Felicia so hard, did crazy shit, got above a 4.0, like did everything, like track, cross country, softball, even did cheer. I played for the Olympic development team. Like I played, like we won state cup, won all my teams, I got a scholarship. It was never enough. It was never going to make me white. And so the journey was really long to get to my poet self. But I think to my what I end up using poetry, I realize now is kind of to like navigate and mostly critique my own motives, which I cannot trust, because I've internalized whiteness so deeply that I am my own oppressor most times, and so what poetry, like my experience with poetry, it's been a very like Michelle, like you said, like it's been a shame, a place of shame, but it's also been a place of liberation, but it's been a place of confrontation. Like it's not fun there, but the moments of clarity, they're worth it. As traumatizing as it takes to get there, you're done with like a fucking poem or a book, you're all messed up and stuff. It's worth getting there. And so in my experience, it's really been freeing, and it's really like new, like me admitting that I'm Chicana, me reading like people of color is new. while I started doing it like maybe 9 years ago, I'm just now owning it. And I'm angry. And I'm filled with and fueled by my rage. And, you know, it shows up in all these different ways, because I think, you know, as a Chicana poet now, I can say that, you know, but just to be in this space with Chicana poets is a gift. Because now that I'm having like being invited and having spaces, I'm like, I'm always on with 2 men. I'm always on with 3 men. I'm always on, you know, and it's not that like, I'm not trying to be around men, like, but like, we're not being centered. And so now as a poet, now that I'm stepping into myself, now that I appreciate the information in my anger, you know, that I'm feeling like there's a lot of work to do, like in the Chicanx canon, in myself. And I didn't do it, so I'm not ashamed, you know, but I am here to like call people in who want to pick up. And I think that it's a lot of work to do, you know. I think part of my journey getting here was feeling like I wasn't allowed in the canon because I hadn't read Andres Montoya, I hadn't read Sandra Cisneros, I hadn't read like all these folks. And sometimes it would be almost used like a gate against me, like, oh, don't tell anybody you never read that shit. Like, don't tell anybody you never do that. Like, you know, don't tell nobody you never read Michelle Serros, you know? I'm like, why? Because it's not my fault. So, but it was used, I think, a lot of times like to kind of keep me out or to shame me. And I'm like, you know what? I don't relate to, I love Andres Montoya, but I don't relate to him the way my male, you know, counterparts do. You know, I relate to him differently, but no less deeply. But I am going to critique his ass. You know what I mean? And so if you're interested in evolving, then let's roll, you know? And I recently started reading some like Jose Esteban Munoz, you know, and I'm hollering, you know, and I'm like, oh, like this person told me it's problematic. Is that true? What do you think? And then Carmen Jimenez Smith was like, well, if we're doing things right, eventually we all become problematic because we're like changing things. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So it's okay. And so my journey now as a poet is kind of like, Rachel McKibbins posted something the other day where she's like, I'm a recovering misogynist. And I'm like, me too, because this is what I got to learn and own so much later. And I think for a lot of us that we're like clutching to it, you know, it's like we never had the space, and whatever space, but fucking, I'm gonna clutch onto it. I'm not gonna let it go because we earned it, and it was hard to get here. But we're going other places too, you know, we're going other places too. It's just hard when you're not surrounded by women sometimes, or sometimes you're in spaces that people don't pick up, like I said, when you call in. And so I wish somebody would have exposed me to those ideas and told me this way earlier. I wish somebody would have told me, like, when I was 10 years old saying my favorite movie was The Color Purple, that what I really meant, you know, is a shout out. It's like I really loved Alice Walker and Toni Morrison and all these stories that I didn't know, you know, I didn't know who wrote them. I wish somebody would have told me, like, to speak with the confidence of a mediocre white man, you know. Shout out to Vanessa Villarreal. I wish somebody would have told me not to say no to myself before the world said it to me. And they do, you know. Shout out to Chelly. And I also wish I wish I would have like had the curiosity to not let my shame stop me from like learning who I was, and not just through Chicana Poetics, but through like Black feminist poetics, because so much of the ideas that I'm learning now, I'm realizing they're not ours. It start with us either, you know? And a lot of the work that I know that I'm trying to do and failing like every day, but trying to do is owed to other women of color. And I guess lastly, I'm really grateful to be here. Like I said, I know a lot of us too are in academia, and I'd be curious to chat about the struggles and tensions we have and do, like with our privileges and maybe resources sometimes. And I want to thank Jen for pulling this together and doing all the labor that women always do, but doing it for other women means a lot. So, thank you.
That was beautiful, Sarah, and I just can relate on just about every level, you know? And so that's why I wanted this space. I was at a panel for Latinx folks where the men consistently spoke over the women again and again. And eventually I just sat back because I knew that I was gonna start to speak and I was gonna get cut off. So I just sat back. And I think that there was Selena, and then it was also that moment of just like, I want a space for us. You know, so thank you so much for that. I want to open up to anybody who, any of our panelists. So Irene, Leslie, Sarah, Michelle, Felicia, and Sochi, to talk about for a few minutes, what advice you would give to other Chicana, Chicanx writers. You know, we've been talking about systemic problems, and one of the numbers that always jumps out to me as a writer is often the lack of Latinx folks as publishers, right? So editors in the publishing industry. So for instance, according to Forbes, Latinx representation accounts for 6% of the publishing industry, yet Latinx folks make up 55 million people in the US. Right. And the Poets and Writers claims that the 2018 survey shows an overall increase of diversity shifting from 86% to 84% white. So there's an increase in diversity, 2%, but it's still 84% white. There's no Native representation in the publishing industry as in this 2018 survey, and Latinx decreased to 3% according to this survey. And so, you know, it's a struggle. We've talked about, we taught ourselves, right? We came out, we found out that we were a Chicana, and we taught ourselves, right? Nobody taught us. And then they're not publishing us, right? So I came out with all these books. I write a book a year. I write 2-3 books a year. I mean, that's the reality of how much I write. And it is a struggle every single day to find somebody who will publish my work. And I know it's good. Now I know we're all good here. All of us Chicanas are, you know, we are excellent at our craft. That's not the problem, right? And so what advice, because, you know, I've always said, you know, knock on the door, they don't let you in, you go around, you find a fire escape, you climb in through the window, then you go open the doors for everybody else, and you let each other in, because we deserve a seat at the table, right? We are meant to be here. We have things that we know each other need to hear. So I would love to hear your advice based on your experiences facing this real struggle of lack of diversity and lack of Latinx folks in the publishing world.
Okay, so I'm really bad at following instructions. There's like 5 things I need to say before I get to there, but I'm gonna try to connect it. The first thing, especially because Sara made me think of this so much. So one of my, you know, we talk a lot about our foremothers, but we also, I think, need to acknowledge even more the writers of our own generation, of our own age, who are so, the source of so much strength and inspiration to us. One of them for me is Filipina Pinay writer, Barbara Jane Reyes. One of the things that I think her work teaches is how important it is for us to own our rage. Because in some ways, rage ends up being the path through which we claim our space. And before rage, we don't know how to claim our space, and we don't know how to hold on to our space. You know, we hear so much not only about shame, but about imposter syndrome and all these other things. I think the only solution to that, what I always tell myself when I feel like I'm not in the right space, and you know, and I'm a writer coming into a lot of spaces where, You know, I've had to think, okay, I don't have a bachelor's degree. I don't have an MFA. I'm not an academic. I don't belong in these spaces. And what I tell myself is, aduéñate. You take the space, you claim it, you own it, it is yours. None of this, you know, I've worked my ass off, and that is my justification for taking space. I have worked, this is mine. But we almost need that rage because we've not been taught that. We've not been taught to take space, and we've not been taught to own our rage. Connected with that, I wanted to speak to something that Felicia said about how we move towards ideas of liberation. And I've been talking about this for the last couple of years nonstop. And that is that we also have to interrogate what we read and even what we are writing. Are we modeling hopelessness and powerlessness and voicelessness in our work? And without going into too much detail, I know that that is a lot of what we've seen, you know, in a lot of that first wave of Chicana writing. There is a lot of that in there. So how do we interrogate that? How do we remove that? How do we imagine the world we want to see? How do we imagine, as Felicia was saying, how do we imagine that space where we are free of oppression? And a lot of that, I keep thinking about Toni Morrison's Not Writing for the White Gaze. We almost always interpret that as being about not writing for a white audience or not being concerned with a white market, but it's more than that. It is, if you write for a white gaze, you are assuming relationships between people and the earth, between people and nature, between people and spirit, between people and life, people and death, people and body. There are so many assumptions of what these relationships are. If we untether all of that, you know, for me, a big guidance is, you know, what I have learned from my indigenous ancestry about different ways to perceive these relationships. That, I think, is how we begin not just to move toward, but to actually inhabit those spaces and then write from those places. I mean, that's the power of writing. That's the power of poetry and of story, that we can start to model what it looks like to live free, to live liberated, to live free of these oppressions, to live decolonized. What does it look like? What does it feel like? We can do that as writers. So why wouldn't that be our greatest mission? And what else did I want to say? To try to relate back to the question that Jen asked, you know, this is part of the reason that we have to be stubborn. We have to be more stubborn than everybody else. We just have to be stubborn and take that space. We have to decide, all right, let's create our own press. Let's support the presses from our community. Let's read and support the writers in our community. Let's create things. One of the things that I have to say one of the lessons that I learned from Sandra Cisneros and from being in Macondo was about what you do with the resources you have. You know, let's say you have some money. Don't just give somebody some money. Make it an award, give it a name, establish a thing, increase the value of things. You know, how do we do that for each other? How do we do that for the writers to come? Also, in the same way that we are not writing for the white gaze, I think we also have to detach ourselves from thinking that there's only one way to publish, that there are only certain presses to publish with, that there are only certain awards that are worth winning, and that all of these are tied to white establishments. You know, there are other things. We can build other things, and there are other things that already exist. And so I'm always afraid that people are going to think they have to write a certain way, that they have to change their writing to be published, that they have to change their writing to be, you know, to get an agent and to be published by a New York Press publishing house. The thing is here, when we think of how much of our lives and our energy go into our writing, why would you spend it on that rather than on finding your own authentic voice, the stories you need to tell, and creating community with them, healing yourself, whatever your goals are? That is where the emphasis is. Why do we do this? And to always stay connected to why we do this work.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Thank you so much. I love that advice. I'm taking notes over here, taking it to heart.
I wanted to say something.
Yeah.
You love everything you said, and a lot of what everyone said I relate to so much. And you talked about this taking space, forcefully, aggressively taking space. I understand that because my personality, but I think we all are here because of the women before us who behaved that way. I know that personally, I come from women who had very little resources and figured shit out. And I think that's the thing about publishing. We are very resourceful and we will find a way to do things. And I'm speaking from a fourth generation carrying all of the self-hatred and shame of being pushed to assimilate, so that it's the rage and the sadness is in my bones. I have a physical disability, and while it's a scientific fact, it is also the result of all the trauma of colonization and the push, the pressure to get that 4.0, to go to the best school, to be better, 5 times better, so that no one will question me. And so that when they do question me, I'm ready. I identify, Michelle, with what you said, having to do homework to get your homework done, going over and beyond. But I think we learned that from our mothers and our grandmothers, that we have to take things, and that we have to take this rage and all of the trauma and the pain that we're carrying from our ancestors and figure out how to make something beautiful from it. If I were to comment on what I see right now in Chicana Poetics, it would be a sense of empowerment. There's so much breadth in style and aesthetics right now. It's exciting. It's exciting to see how so many different experience is being shared, and that we're not being pigeonholed anymore. But I did want to say that, my great grandmother figured out a way to use a blacksmith's salary to send her boys to college and to send her 2 daughters, one to a music conservatory and another to study with the most prominent painter in town. Okay, they had a 2-bedroom or 2-room house, 600 square feet. So if she can figure that out, we can figure things out. And I'm sure that most of us can say we had grandmothers and great grandmothers who did a lot with very little. So even though it's depressing, the reality of publishing and what we face, the discrimination and the racism, still, we know how to get things done. And especially when we come together and we're in community, we're with our peers, that holds us up and that helps us to keep going.
I want to say that my advice is to find your folks and ask for what you want. And then it's like, and that keep doing that. Like a career doesn't just happen, a book doesn't just happen. I think we all know these things take years, right? And so that as long as every opportunity you have, you're looking for your folks and you're finding like-minded people and you're like, hey, I dig you. I'm kind of that kind of person. If I like you, I'm instantly like, I like you, let's hang out, and people get weirded out. But I mean, anyway, so you use those times where you're with people to do that, and then you have them and you're helping each other out and you're supporting each other and you're also at the same time. It's a lot of looking sideways. Like Jenna was talking about Barbara Jane Reyes And there are so many writers, you know, that we're coming up with right now or come a little bit before me who I admire and love, and I look to them a lot. So it's like you look sideways to around who's around you, and you support each other and you help each other out. And at the same time, you're helping each other out to move up. And then it's like every time you ask for something or apply for something, you may not get it, but even in the process of applying for that thing, you've already like been able to envision something new. So like I really, you know, I'm the director of Women Who Submit, and I really believe in, I like applying for grants and fellowships. I mean, one, because, you know, of course I want the funding, but two, it helps me to envision a project. And I'm a person that's very practical. If I can't see it in my mind, I'm never gonna make it happen. So I use that project and that, you know, that application to envision something and get jazzed about it and excited. And then when I don't get it, because, you know, 90% of the time you don't, or more actually, but now I have momentum, right? To like move forward with it, to figure out how to make that happen. Because as Leslie was saying, we come from women and people who make shit happen, right? So we have that in us. But for me personally, I need to be able to see it to make it happen. And then I have my people, my folks to come back to and be like asking for, you know, and I ask them for feedback, or I talk an idea out with someone, or somebody comes to me and tells me, you know, gives me advice or tells me, you know, something. Anyway, I need this and I need that, basically. Get your folks and ask for what you want. That's my advice.
So I'm thinking about how, you know, I came to poetry through prose and through creative nonfiction. And so it seems like even in my poetry, even in short stories, I'm always writing about something from my own life. I'm always kind of like reconfiguring a memoir on the page. And so some of what shows up in my poetry now is the work that I do off the page. And it's my consulting practice and a lot of racial equity and healing work. And after George Floyd was murdered, it was like every nonprofit leader in the country kind of woke up and said, holy shit, there's racism, like, you know, help us racial equity and healing practitioners. And the way that showed up in Albuquerque was all around the statue to Juan de Oñate, a conquistador, you know, the first governor of New Mexico, though no one voted for him, and who was particularly brutal toward the people of Acoma Pueblo. So there's a statue to him. It's a long story, but Albuquerque put together this process to address that statue. And I was asked to coordinate the facilitation team for that. And I think of through that process, how clear it became to me how as Chicanas, we really hold that space of in between. And it's a place in which we're both survivors of white supremacy. And what I notice here, especially in New Mexico, people who also benefit from our proximity to whiteness, and how that plays inside of us, how I know for me, how I am cut off from my indigenous roots, how I don't know who my people were on that bloodline, even with ancestry.com, and even with having my DNA done. And I think about how humbling that work is, and how what it means to hold that space of sitting with somebody from Acoma Pueblo, or sitting with someone from the Navajo Nation, or having a co-facilitator from one of the pueblos in New Mexico, and really having grace extended to me as a Chicana, like as somebody who represents this like in-between space of both benefiting from white supremacy and also being a survivor of it, and these multiple waves of colonization that have happened in our state. And so I think that because of that work, and because I study nonviolent communication and all of these things, I'm kind of flattened when I realize I have a blind spot. And so I just want to acknowledge my own blind spots on this particular panel as we were putting it together, and who we wanted to center, like who we spoke about centering in this series, and who we will center in this series, and then and who I failed to lift up as a cis woman, as a cisgendered woman, as a straight woman. And I really want to commit here and now together with the other panelists, and we've talked about this offline, but I want to say it here, to really making sure that the next panel and the next panel and the next panel centers trans voices and queer voices, and is all in, and is inclusive of all Latinx women and Chicanx women. I think about like these twins that show up when we're called on our shit, right? However gently or however harshly we're called on it. And I really want to thank, I really want to thank my dear friend Anel Flores for reaching out with such fierce grace, and I'm borrowing that term from a friend, Janine Yazzie, fierce grace. So, you know, I don't know if she trademarked that, but she should. And just a simple question of like, how is this panel representative of that aspiration? And my immediate instinct was to get defensive. And then right under that was the instinct to just be filled with shame. And I want to say that the antidotes to those two things are things that show up in my friendship with Anel. And it's love, it's community, it's curiosity, and it's a spirit of learning, of always learning versus always having to know. So I am still processing how I'm going to show up better now that I know better. And I'm so appreciative of this group of panelists for being on that road with me. And I also am just appreciative of the folks who extend fierce grace. And yeah, that's all I have to say. So actually, advice, sorry, I'm bad at following directions too, even though, so I think my advice is like, we need each other. We need community. I'm done with the like isolated, I'm just gonna suffer here in silence. I'm not gonna ask for help. I have to do it all by myself. And every time I get tripped up or I can't write, or I'm trying to like chew my way out of something like a pit bull, it is a trap, and I have to like coach myself back into reaching out to people and saying either like, I missed this and I'm sorry, or I acknowledge the harm I've caused, or I need help, or can I just talk through this with you, or thank you, or whatever. So I think the advice is like, we need each other. We need each other. We need each other.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Sarah, Xochitl, Felicia, did you have any advice that you wanted to add to that? I'm trying to think if there was anyone who hadn't spoken yet.
I just wanted to say one thing, because thank you, Michelle, for bringing that up. I was trying to get to that, and then that was in my, like, basically also have your folks who are going to call you out in this fierce grace way. That's also part of it. Like, you know, having people who will call you in, as Sarah said, and I also thank Anel for doing that, because it's not an easy thing to do. And any of my friends who have also done that for me, like with Women Who Submit, I have taken some, you know, some wrong steps, and there have been people who on the back end said, hey, you know, you should think about this. Okay, so like, I really need those people, not only just to support me, but also to like help me see where what I'm not seeing. So thank you.
I think that's such a big part too of how do we continue, how do we succeed, how do we, right, get ourselves out of these paradigms that have been put upon us, these labels that have been put upon us. And that call up culture, you know, we don't have to be a part of that, right? We don't have to publicly shame each other, right? We can be there for each other and help teach each other without silencing each other. And so I am so grateful, as everyone here, I'm so grateful for you, so thankful for everyone here who can teach us and correct us in things where we have misstepped, but also love us and come with love. And I think that's how we continue succeeding and how we continue rising as individuals and as community. So absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Xochitl. Thank you, everyone. Did anyone else want to add anything? Felicia, Sarah?
Yeah, I'll add, you know, if I was gonna give advice, and then like just in the realm of what, you know, is already on the table, I think like this group did it where we kept in mind like where the root and the heart like of this panel was. But I've been part, and we've all been part, I'm sure, of a lot of situations where that has not happened. And I think what happens, if I had to give advice, I'd be like, remember, it's white supremacy that's making us like think we're like, you know, like, I hope I'm not more than a woman, you know, you know, but remember, like, it's not us. It's not your homegirls. It's whiteness and colonization and white supremacy. And I feel like really grateful to everybody who held it down, and like, whether that was articulated or not, I felt like that's what it was like. There was a knowing that was unspoken that it came from, you know, and on that tip, while you know, we're all like very well versed in, you know, English literature and the canon, and, you know, our white workshop colleagues and our professors who all uphold whiteness as craft, you know, I'm exhausted by anticipating the white gaze, and I do it all day. Like I said, I'm so suspicious. Like, I don't trust me, you know. But I would say, like, to any writer, any Latino writer, keep that in mind, that there's a white gaze. Your resistance is even resisting the white gaze. It's so, like, how much do you get to just be you without being against whiteness all the time? And so it's okay to protect your energy, you know, and it's okay to just want to recover yourself in a poem without having to say, this is what I'm not, before you say, this is what I am. Sometimes you could just be like, this is what I am. And if you call people in, you know, colleagues in academia, you know, other poets, and they don't pick up, then protect your energy, you know? And I think we're all here because everybody picked up, and we don't have to do white people's work anymore. You know, we can do our work, and that work is worthy, and it's enough. So I would just like fucking remember that shit.
Thanks. Felicia, did you want to add anything before we come to a close?
You know, I just want to say thank you all the panelists, and also Jen, and for holding space for each other to really have a raw conversation where, you know, we're not just talking about our art. We're not just talking about our journeys as writers. Like there's so much more that we're discussing on a structural level, on systematic levels, on the imagination of freedom. You know, I think that what I'm seeing in Chicana poetry, in Latinx poetry, in poetry by BIPOC writers and trans, queer, non-binary writers, writers with disabilities, and is really this imagination to break this down out of the narrative and oppressions that we're in, you know, to really show what through our art, what a world of liberation can look like. And I think for me, for advice when it comes to Chicana writers who are out there and thinking about publishing, and, you know, these hard realities that we are constantly running into, cliffs and doors shut on us, is that believe in yourself, I've been rejected thousands of times. I'm not talking 1,000 times. I'm not talking 2,000 times. I'm talking 3,000s of times over the course of 20 years. And it's like, and within that time, there's been books, there's been some publications. And I do agree that we can create our own, but at the same time, I don't just want to create our own. I want to have Chicana voices in the highest platforms of publication, because that's where we should be. And so that if that means dismantling from the inside out, if that means building us up as editors, and and for me, if you're not willing to bring along other BIPOC, trans, queer, and poets with disabilities, don't get into publishing. If you're not interested in making those voices front and center and loud and clear, don't go near publishing, right? And those people who are in publishing who are not doing that, well, you better look out because it's not going to be like that forever. We're not going to stand for it. We're not going to stand for it. And so, it's a sharp dawn coming. It's a very sharp dawn, but at the same time, it is necessary. It is absolutely necessary. So, believe in yourself. And, people mention community, and I think that this wonderful conversation that came about from language, right? From miscommunication, from intention versus impact, was shared in a space that felt so welcoming to have that conversation. And that so very rarely happens. And so I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that this event still has taken place, because I feel honored to have been able to meet all of you, to learn from all of you. I mean, I took notes. I took notes on a panel that I'm on. And you've made impact to me. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, I love this so much. Everyone feel free. Well, actually, let me just say real quick that I'm so thankful. And please let me know, get in touch with me on my website, jennifergivon.com, or email me. I want to continue this series because this is so important, for the LGBTQIA community, for however I can help facilitate, and I welcome your help, these discussions, because I think this is where it's at, coming with the love, coming with the community, coming with, this is our space. And together, I think we will make those differences. The dawn is coming. I love that, Felicia, so much. So thank you. The dawn is coming. And guess what? We are the dawn. All of you here watching, listening, all you beautiful writers and creators and dreamers, activists, thank you so much. So please feel free to unmic and applaud for each other, and thank each other. And I think that will conclude our evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Yay.
I love you. Take very good care of yourselves, and please be in touch with me. I want to continue these conversations. Be safe and well.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night. Love you all.
Bye, Jen.
Bye, Felicia.